Welcome everybody to the Monday Night Tours. We are your guides on this magical journey that takes us through the Monday Night Wars. I am Josh Kaiser, and I am joined today by Kyle Hoagland.
What is going on today? Where exactly are you? For those, I'm pretty sure people can notice that it doesn't sound like you're in your normal, multi-million-dollar studio.
No, I'm not in the normal recording studio where, the big buco bucks that Monday Night Tours makes us to, help host that. I am currently in a hotel room in the middle of bumfuck Illinois, so
I'm sure at some point Nitro was probably hosted there.
It's a good chance, and this would be the period of time that it, where they would host in a smaller city like this, but not today, as we are discussing the December 4th, 1995 editions of WCW Monday Nitro and WWF Raw, Kyle. And Nitro, we're live from the home of Super Bowl 30, if that doesn't make you feel old. Phoenix, Arizona. We even got to see the skyline of Phoenix, Kyle.
I know, it felt bad. I feel like there had been at least a couple of nice little sights to see in Macon, Georgia. You would know, you've been there.
There's at least a gas station, I can tell you that much. So
that is a confirmation.
That said, we go down to the commentary booth, Kyle, and we've got Pepe dressed up like an angel. So we're now 14 episodes into Nitro. At what point does Pepe stop being dressed up and stop being part of the show?
I mean, as long as the machine of creativity that is Steve Mongo McMichael keeps on churning up good, like just brilliant ideas to dress up the dog, then I mean, I think what probably happens is once they run out of costumes, they're like, shoot, we have nothing for Mongo. Well, you might as well wrestle. Well,
luckily for us, Kyle, right now he's still got costume ideas, and just like Pepe's his guardian angel, the Hogan's gang is Hogan's guardian angels for against the Dungeon of Doom. So that's how Mongo ties that all together. It's almost like a 9th grade English report, how poorly that ties together. But hey, here we are anyways. And meanwhile, Kyle, we've got Bobby Heenan, who's starting to get involved with the I fucking don't care anymore, and I'm gonna do my own thing. And he's got a bag of what he calls weasel wafers. It's like an old bag of potato chips with a raccoon tail coming out of it, and the bag just keeps popping up the entire time.
I almost feel like tweeting Eric Bischoff and being like, look at this episode and then tell me who in creative thought that this was a good idea. Well,
keep in mind Eric Bischoff is wearing a jean jacket with a Native American print on it. So, really
it looked. I mean, I think that was more like he's dressing up for the location that he's in.
Yeah, I think so too. But in general, commentary booth totally just in pure form this week. And they start discussing, Kyle. We've got Lex Luger and Macho Man Randy Savage in our main event tonight for the world title. So pretty big deal that you think they would have promoted a little bit more than, oh, by the way, that's what's happening tonight.
Which probably means that it's probably not going to have the ending anybody really cares to have. That usually, if you're going to have something like that, you just can't not miss or
right.
Can't miss. I don't know what I'm talking about. All I know is that I think you and I have watched enough Nitros that would usually if by the way world title, I'm pretty sure this is a non-consequential match, but we'll see as we go down.
Right. They also let us know, Kyle, that at Starrcade, that Lex Luger, who's fighting for the world title tonight, he will be in a triangle match with Sting and Flair for the number 1 contendership. So it's always nice to let us know that the guy who's in the world title match tonight is also going to be in a number 1 contenders match next month.
And they try to make up for it where, if he were to win the title, then they would just switch out Macho Man.
Yeah, it was very loose. I just thought it was kind of dumb that they did that. Why not hold off this number 1 contendership triangle match for, Saturday night or next week? Or
for the sake that they already are having everybody, everyone else's matches, probably everyone else on the card, we won't know any of the matches on the card unless you actually watch the card, and yet they're already pushing this triangle match so many weeks in advance.
Right.
It's so weird how they do it, where they don't push the card, they push one match.
They push the main event. And they did, speaking of main event, Kyle, Hulk Hogan, the Giant, and Ric Flair are all on thin ice. They're on probation with the WCW powers that be for all their shenanigans that have been taking place on recent episodes of Nitro. So we'll have to see what transpires with all of that. But in the meantime, Kyle, we're opening up with a tag team championship match. We got the Harlem Heat defending their titles against American Males. And, before the match starts, Kyle, I thought it was a little strange. They really pushed that the Harlem Heat are the heavy favorites in this, and the American Males are like severe underdogs, which I find funny given that Harlem Heat lost the tag titles to American Males on Nitro like a month ago or something like that. So I feel like it shouldn't have been pushed that big a deal. They actually make a comment like, hey, Harlem Heat could lose just like the Cowboys were upset last night or the day before, which me, Kyle, I always like to research the old sports analogies there, the sports comments that they're talking about. And those 10-3 Cowboys lost to the 4-9 Redskins 24-17. So
didn't the Cowboys lose last week too? Didn't it, when they talking about the Cowboys just last week?
I don't know if it was last week or like 2 weeks ago, but it was fairly recently. I think the Cowboys done a little bit of a skid here. They lost to the 49ers, I believe, but it might have been a couple weeks ago at that point. Kyle, I gotta say, before the match started, though, there's a little pre-match shoving between both teams. Normally, Nick Patrick rings the bell at that point, but he held off. So I got to give him props for starting the match at the appropriate time.
And the funny thing is, I think he actually did a pretty good job of making sure he held off on calling the bell until it was time. And then I think this is the only match he officiated for the rest of the night. I'm pretty sure our other favorite, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, we'll get to him in a bit. As far as this match goes, Kyle, American Males dominated a lot early on in the match, and then the match kind of takes a weird turn because Colonel Parker shows up. Obviously, Colonel Parker and Sister Sherri, I think is what they're calling her at this point. They still have their little love thing going on ever since the Harlem Heat won the titles against Dirty Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Bucket. What pay-per-view was that? Fall Brawl, I believe. So he shows up and he's got a wrapped gift in his hands. They kind of go back and the match is going on, and all of a sudden, kind of in the background of the match, out at ringside, you see Sherri opening the gift up, and it looks like some sort of lacy robe thing that she puts on, and literally nobody could give a shit about this. They're not showing it, it's in the background behind the match. They're not zooming up on it. Literally nobody's calling any attention to this robe or anything like that. Booker T, Stevie Ray, Scotty Riggs, Bagwell, none of them are paying attention to those two out there. It was very strange. Well, then finally they do cut to the camera and they show that with the lacy robe, he got her a ring. So I don't know if that means they're engaged or just bought her some jewelry or what. At that point, they do show Booker T. He yells something at Sherri, and you're thinking, oh, maybe there's going to be a distraction again. No, Sherri and Colonel Parker leave, and the match continues. And next thing you know, the match ends shortly after that. I got to say, Cal, it was very strange how they kind of worked that in there, but Booker T looks great. He does some of these like martial arts scissor kicks and things like that Ahmed Johnson wishes he could do. And then of course he wins with the Harlem Hangover, which I think is a sweet looking finisher. And probably the only other thing worth mentioning with this match is they make a comment that Booker T's like yelling to the crowd, and they show the guy in the crowd, and it turns out it's AC Green, which means nothing to pretty much everybody because they have to repeat it 4 or 5 times before you realize he plays for the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, they're in Phoenix. That's about it for the AC Green thing for me, Kyle. Ultimately, I give this a 2.5 star match. I thought it was pretty solid, not great, not terrible. But I was a little confused by the whole Sherri Colonel Parker situation and how it had really nothing to do with the match at all. And I just think it's worth noting that, AC Green, I know they got the sports guy in here, and, Lawrence Taylor's been involved in WWF, and they do some of that here and there, Mr. T in the past, but I think this has started the beginning of, WCW's, bringing in the celebrity, the sports athletes, the famous people to their product. So I thought that was worth noting. What'd you think?
I gave it a 2.25 star rating. Honestly, really not a bad start to the show overall. Had a little bit of everything. You had some kung fu. You got AC Green chants. I thought that the Harlem Heat were being cheered, even though they were clearly the heels on the show, which I thought was a little bit weird. And I also had on here that I think we also had the birth, perhaps, of the Spinneroonie. This is the first time I ever saw the Spinneroonie on television since we watched this.
I noticed he did it, and I'm not sure. I don't remember whether this is the first time I remember seeing it or not. You might be right with that.
So I was pretty stoked about that. Mongo throwing out the "We got a Donnybrook," which is it's an old Irish saying, basically meaning this is a brawl where somebody loses like an eye and an arm. So just thought that was a really weird thing to all of a sudden decide to say in Phoenix, fucking Arizona. But once again, that's Mongo for you. I shouldn't be shocked. 2.25 stars.
Yeah, and then we followed that up, Kyle. We got Mean Gene. He's discussing things with Lex Luger and Sting. He actually says we're going to talk a little turkey, gentlemen. Obviously, this is the first Nitro following Thanksgiving, so why not throw a late Thanksgiving comment there? And pretty much the promo here is Sting says, he's friends with Lex, but he disagrees, with Lex's business
Lifestyle.
partners, life choices. Yeah, right. Being with Jimmy Hart in the Dungeon of Doom. And then the two of them kind of go in this weird situation where Sting says, you could win the title tonight and I could win the triangle match, and then we'd wrestle each other. And, props to Gene. Gene says, slow your roll, gentlemen. Gene's not playing around. Why are you guys, putting the cart before the horse, if you will, counting your chickens before they hatch. Lex, meanwhile, agrees with Sting and says, "Yeah, I'm going to win the title tonight. You're on a roll." I believe was I don't know which one said they were on a roll, but
Sting said he was on a roll. The guy who just lost his title.
Right. But he didn't lose his title on a pay-per-view or in front of a WCW Nitro crowd, so
or anyone.
Right. So Lex agrees, basically says, yeah, we're going to have this match after I win the title and you win the triangle match. And, that's basically the promo. So a little strange here. I think is a little premature myself to even approach this topic. Why don't you wait and see if Lex wins tonight, then you can start approaching this. Okay, now Lex is the champion. Hey, guess what? I'm staying. I've won some matches. I'm looking pretty good. I got this triangle match coming up. Lex, there's a real possibility you and I are going to wrestle. Instead of throwing all this out, I think a little premature. Kyle, you seem to have a little theory here, though, that Lex Luger is basically kind of like a back and forth. Yeah, they're pushing he's Sting's friend, but he's also in the Dungeon of Doom, and he's kind of just this weird, middle floater tweener kind of thing. And you think it might be because of his entrance into WCW kind of came right when Vader was like booted out of WCW, and you think that maybe he's been taking over the Vader storyline.
I think that from a creative perspective, that was the easiest way to insert him. Lex is in a really weird purgatory where I don't even consider him in the Dungeon of Doom anymore. I don't think he really associates himself other than the fact that he's being managed by Jimmy Hart. He doesn't come down with the Taskmaster. He has not lately been helping out anybody else in the Dungeon of Doom. He's basically been taking care of himself. And now the only person he's really been eyeing on is either Hogan or Savage, but he seems to be doing it on his own accord, not because the Dungeon of Doom have some sort of, some motive. So
right.
It's kind of like a strange thing. He's almost like an independent gun for hire. So it's almost a good and a bad thing for Lex, because I think Lex knows he does not want to be kind of associated with a group that I think right now is had some steam, but I think at this point it's getting a little bit weaker and weaker, especially with the whole Yeti debacle. But because of it too, Lex really doesn't have much of a storyline, and it starts to make me think that maybe they were giving I think Vader. It sounds like Vader was going to be the one that was going to turn heel and turn on Hogan and go to the Dungeon of Doom. But since he left, they just said, well, we'll just have Luger do that. And so that's why I feel like this kind of made more sense, that Vader looked like more of a Dungeon of Doom character to be with those misfits. And Luger is just in such a weird place because he's not, as a character, not Vader, obviously.
I mean, he's not Vader, but he does have a metal plate in his forearm, so that might fit him in the misfits.
I can go with that, but it's a weird place for him to be, because I do believe that he helped out the Dungeon of Doom kind of for his own gain, but he doesn't come to the ring. If the Dungeon of Doom is being interviewed, he's nowhere to be seen. So I think it's a very different way. It's a very different position for him to be in.
Yeah, and you're right. He might just be working with Jimmy Hart, but they don't really, like you said, they don't really say he's part of the Dungeon of Doom. They don't mention him and Kevin Sullivan. It's always him and Jimmy Hart. And just because Jimmy Hart's it's almost like Jimmy Hart now isn't so much associated with the Dungeon of Doom as much. He still comes out with Kevin Sullivan, I guess, with the Giant, but he doesn't. We'll kind of see where they go going forward, but it's an interesting thought. So. We'll have to see where they write it out. I'm assuming by the end of the year, whatever they had planned for Vader's probably going to be done, so they can probably start fresh with Lex come January.
We can only hope.
But after that, Kyle, Sting finishes up his little segment. They play his music, and he starts to walk back to the dressing room. Then realizes he has a match, and kind of turns back around and heads into the ring.
And he tried to play it off. I'm like, nah, dude, no, you fucked up. I saw it. He kind of gave that smirk like shit.
Right. Yep. And you kind of called it out that they mentioned he's from Venice Beach, and I don't remember, Kyle. Is that just always where Sting's been, or is that now that he's part of Team Hulkamania that they say he's from Venice Beach like they do with Macho Man and Hogan?
I think that's only been for this. I think he's always been billed before then from. Well, I guess it's always been Venice Beach. When I looked it up when I looked up in his profile, Every Man's Nightmare. He either has been billed from Every Man's Nightmare or from Venice Beach, California. So I think Venice Beach, California has always been
coincidental. Then, yeah, he's always from there.
It might be. Well, I think he's not really from there. He's just billed.
Oh yeah,
from there.
Right. He's actually like born in like Omaha or something, I think.
Right. Yep.
But he's got a match here with Kurosawa, Kyle, who they're still pushing as the guy who breaks arms, and that's his gimmick. And it's funny is when I saw Kurosawa come out, I'm like, doesn't he come out with Colonel Parker? And I'm like, maybe they just kind of dropped that. But then the commentary booth starts talking about it, that he's not out there, and he actually doesn't show up for the match. And they're like, who's I just laughed when they made a comment like, who's interpreting for Kurosawa? And they said, Colonel Parker's too busy interpreting for Sherri right now, which is a little sexual innuendo that they're making right there. And so they do make a comment at one point that while other shows are paying the bills, aka Raw is on commercial, we're here in the action. And to be honest, Kyle, there's really not a whole lot to talk about with this match other than Randy Anderson's a bad referee, and it shows big here. I think you made a comment where he looks at Sting and yells him to release a hold when Kurosawa was the one doing the hold.
Yeah, Kurosawa had Sting's arm kind of wrenched on the top rope, and Randy Anderson decided instead of getting in like Kurosawa's face and counting to 5, he's actually talking to Sting and counting to 5.
Yeah,
and it was just kind of weird because basically Kurosawa was just holding that, could basically keep that hold on as long as he wanted. This is very tough for me to say, but I feel like Randy Anderson needs to take some notes from Nick Patrick.
That is, it's really sad, and it's the most egregious thing, Kyle, is the finish to this match. It's pretty much a squash match. Sting wins this. He does lock in the Scorpion Deathlock, and Kurosawa. Randy Anderson gets down to Kurosawa's face. You could see Kurosawa kind of like shaking his head a little bit, kind of in pain. He reaches his hand up like he's fighting to tap or not. Randy Anderson calls for the bell. There's no tap. There's nothing. He just ends the match like that. Sting wins, but it's kind of premature. I give this 1.5 stars. It was kind of a squash match and not a very good one.
Yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do? Sting's on a roll. So yeah, I gave it a 1.25 stars. Kind of a waste of time. Sting isn't a point in his career. He doesn't need squash matches. There's nothing really enhanced him in this match. So I don't know what this match was supposed to do for him. It really didn't make him look any stronger. So yeah, kind of a waste of a match. I gave it a 1.25 stars.
Kyle, then we got our first Starrcade promo from the Orient. We've got the New Japan versus WCW, and that's going to be one of the things they're going to push at this. So you made a comment about the triangle match being the main event, and that's all they're going to talk about. Technically, we're going to get 2 matches. I think they're going to be promoting, obviously, the triangle match, and then whoever's in this, what I don't know, I assume is going to be like a Survivor Series type match, with New Japan wrestlers versus some WCW roster. And their motto or mantra for this one is going to be Hemispheres Collide. And I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you noticed or not. This pay-per-view is taking place on a Wednesday. I thought that was extremely strange for a pay-per-view.
I didn't even notice that. I didn't look at the date, but yeah, I mean that does seem kind of. I don't know if maybe that's because I don't even know where Starrcade is located. Maybe they're doing it in Japan.
That I don't know. It could be something with that because it is coming up on the holiday season. But it's not one of those like where Christmas was on Sunday or New Year's on Sunday. But it's whatever this date is on like a Wednesday or something is like just you could get home for Christmas or something like that. But if it does take place in Japan, then maybe there is some more there. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Then we got our WCW Saturday Night promo, Kyle.
Which by the way, I think one of the things that I look forward to the most, sadly, I know that this just seems weird, is the Saturday Night promo. I love talking about the Saturday Night promo.
It's funny it's the reason we include it in here is because it does. I feel like it is still their A show. Whether Nitro is gonna Nitro will eventually take that over, obviously, but for a while it is still their A show, and we get a lot of it's the only time we get any sort of kind of inclination on what else is going on with storylines and stuff, and that's when we find out what's the tag team division like, what's going on with other titles, and this is kind of another example of that because Disco Inferno is going to be wrestling Johnny B. Bad, and Johnny B. Bad, of course, you remember he had Diamond Doll with him. Well, now they're referring to her as Kimberly, and she's dressed like a Southern Belle or something. It's incredibly bizarre, and
it's a very weird looking hat.
Yeah, and it was just so funny. We find out this kind of stuff in the Saturday Night promo because it'll probably be another month before we'll see Johnny B. Bad and Kimberly on, Nitro. So it's nice to get that little updates on these Saturday Night promos.
I'm convinced that Nitro is the Hulk Hogan show, and then WCW Saturday Night is everything else.
Yeah, it could very well be. Of course, Chris Benoit and Brian Pillman of the Four Horsemen will be tagging against somebody. Hugh Morris will be wrestling against somebody. And then in our main event, Kyle, we got Big Bubba versus Eddie Guerrero. So Saturday night's really cooking this week. Then Kyle, we get our next match. This one was a strange one for me. They got Scott Norton wrestling the Giant. Of course, the Giant comes out with Jimmy Hart and the Taskmaster. And I thought this was a strange booking decision right when they announced that this was going to be a match. And I kind of jot these notes down before I even see what happens in the match. Because I don't know about you, Kyle, but the Giant obviously is being pushed to the moon. He is the strongest, mightiest, the toughest villain, known here. He is going to be the top heel eventually as they groom him to be that strong guy. And Norton is kind of getting pushed as this badass sort of guy who is kind of going through the mid card. And for him to go against the Giant, my initial thought is, well, he's not going to beat the Giant. So either he's going to job the Giant or it's going to be some weird interference or no contest battle on the outside is kind of what I was thinking.
Either way, it's not going to help anybody in this match.
Correct, exactly.
If anything, it's going to squash Norton.
Right. But, Scott Norton found out, Kyle, Eric Bischoff knew him back in the 80s when he worked at Grandma's on the River in Minneapolis. So that was a bizarre little tidbit that Eric Bischoff threw out there.
It just seemed like that was one of those things where Eric felt like that was going to be interesting until he said, and he's like, that was so unimportant. Why did I even bring that up?
Yeah, pretty much. And then you commented how Mongo makes mention that the Giant has taken Andre's power and he's timesing it by 2. Of course, Andre the Giant being his quote-unquote dad.
His kayfabe dad.
Meanwhile, they let us know that Hogan and Sting are going to be wrestling Arn Anderson and Ric Flair next week. That'll probably be their main event, so a lot of star power there in that match. Has the potential to be a great main event. Spoiler alert, it probably won't be a great main event because they'll probably have interferences and who knows what. This match itself, Kyle, not much to talk about. Scott Norton bounced off the Giant like Pepe off a rocking chair. Of course, that's your quote of the week from Mongo McMichael. And this is when Eric Bischoff makes the comment that the C in WCW stands for committed, and he keeps stressing that this show, the main event stuff, we're going to keep going. So if the show was supposed to end at 9 and it's 10:30 at night and the main event's still going on, they're going to keep showing it. So he wants to let you know that the main event this week might run a little bit over.
But that's what's weird is that they bring it up with a match in the middle of the middle of the card.
Right.
Like, why would you bring up like, oh, if this match goes long, and then not to spoil your ending here, but I think literally 30 seconds after they said like, oh, if this match goes long, we're here for you guys, and we're not going to go past 10 o'clock like that other show that's canned. And then like 20 seconds later, Giant hits the choke slam and
Scott
wins.
Norton goes off the top, gets caught, and then gets choke slammed. So Scott Norton pretty much jobs here, which, by the way, when he was choke slammed, I think it might have been Heenan. Someone said, no one has ever done that to Scott Norton before. Needless to say, it's a quick job match for the Giant, more or less. But I thought it was interesting, Kyle, how they talked about they could run late. They also mentioned how they started early. I think it was during the Harlem Heat match. They made a comment, for those of you just joining us, we had, it's so much action, we had to just get going. And I looked at the runtime. I don't know if you noticed or not. Most of these episodes are 45, 47 minutes long. You figure it's an hour show with, 12, 15 minutes of commercials. This one was 55 minutes, so they must have really started about 10 minutes early or so. But anyways, as far as this match goes, I gave it a 1.25 stars. I'm probably being friendly there. I hated the booking decision here. I thought it made both of them look bad. There's actually a moment where Scott Norton, showing his strength, picks the Giant up and holds him up like he's going to do an atomic drop, and holds him up for an impressive amount of time. Except when you're booking the Giant to be this monster, like when Hogan body slammed him, and it's like, Yokozuna getting body slammed or something that's just, out of control, you don't do that. This makes the Giant look far less imposing to me that Scott Norton can lift him up and hold him up there for a period of time. And then meanwhile, Scott Norton turns around and takes and just, choke slam and he's done. I think it made both men came out looking worse than they did coming into the match.
Totally agree. I can kind of at least give the credit to Scott Norton that he is like a bona fide strong man. So like for him being able to pick him up was impressive. And it was a nice little, I guess it's a nice little spot with the match. But yes, from a chemistry perspective and a psychology perspective, if you're trying to make the Giant be the next Andre, which obviously Andre was a much bigger man than currently Paul White is right now. That's not what they
want you to think. They want you to think that this guy's a monster and can't just be manhandled by anyone. And right now, the way Scott Norton is in kayfabe, whether he is big and strong or not, Scott Norton is not on the level where he should be holding up and slamming the Giant.
Yep, I agree. And I think the only thing I got out of this is that the Giant still needs a lot more work in the ring as far as being able to sell stuff. It's basically everything that he took. He just kind of wandered around the ring every time he took a blow. It really, I mean, he gave he looked like he was woozy, but it looked totally. I didn't fall for it at all. He just looked like he was just kind of just like parading around the ring while taking blows to the top turnbuckle. It did not make Scott Norton look that good either.
Absolutely. After this, Kyle, we get Mean Gene, who's calling out Ric Flair. And then Mongo's buddy Charles Barkley comes out with Flair. And it's funny, both of you and I both put in our notes, Charles Barkley was dressed like a dad here. He's got his dad jeans on, baggy T-shirt tucked in to his belt. I mean, a total 90s look.
All he needed was the fanny pack, and he would have had the whole thing.
It was kind of a weird segment altogether. Charles Barkley both talks shit to the crowd, also says they're the best basketball fans in the world here in Phoenix, then says he's not Ric Flair, he's not going to be a tag partner, but he's, Ric Flair's his boy, which of course Ric Flair's big heel here, so he's getting boos. And then Flair basically says Charles could be the next Horseman, which I think the commentary team loses their minds over. And Kyle, just the whole segment in general is a little weird. Again, they're bringing the star power of Charles Barkley into the segment, into the show, so you can appreciate that. But overall, just a strange segment.
Yeah, I agree. This was, I mean, I guess it's one of those things where, hey, let's bring out the celebrity again. But you know what? I was just thinking, I was like, hey, we got AC Green, we got all the world class celebrity we need from Phoenix, right? And it was just also funny because the crowd really kind of muddled cheered for Charles, and at some points just booed him hard.
Yeah, well, they cheered it, at moments because it's like, yeah, it's Charles Barkley. He's, star player for our Phoenix Suns. And then at the same time, they're like, we hate Ric Flair. Why is he out here with Ric Flair? It seemed like Charles Barkley, you want to bring the sports star. Like, it'd be like if the Cavs had LeBron James and they're like, we're going to put him with the Giant. Well, why the hell would you do that? Why don't you put LeBron James with Hulk Hogan or Sting or something like that? Like the people that are being cheered. Like you bring the face and you get the even more cheap pop babyface power by putting the babyface with the top sports star of that team of that.
That's how much everyone loves Flair. And also, I guarantee you, Flair told Charles, "Hey, if you're trying to talk and people are cheering you and it's getting too loud, shush them. They'll love it." And like that's like a cardinal sin. You never shush the crowd.
Oh yeah.
And he did it. And it's like, oh, he just got a shower of booze.
And then, Kyle, after this, we're going to move to our main event with the world title match. Lex Luger coming out with Jimmy Hart versus Macho Man. And speaking of somebody who doesn't know how to work as a face or a heel, we've got Lex Luger high-fiving the crowd on his way out until you make a comment that Jimmy Hart actually kind of said, "Hey, dumbass, you're a heel." And then Lex starts giving the psych, almost high-fiving you kind of thing.
I swear to God, Luger is just so absent-minded when he's not in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, not that he's much better when he is in the ring.
I mean, he's at least a decent hand. He's a decent work, but my God, like he misses his spots. He forgets what side of the fence he's on. When he gets in the ring, he's okay, or I mean, okay for Lex's standards,
right.
But he's just all over the place when he's actually not fighting somebody.
Oh yeah, and then Kyle, we got Macho Man, of course, comes out. His nameplate is changed on the title, which you pointed out, so good to see that WCW took care of that. And then Kyle, before we get ready to this, before this match starts, Mongo McMichael lets us know, go to the bathroom now and flush that remote because we're about to get some action here.
Which back then, there weren't as many universal remotes back in 95 as there are now. I would never flush my remote in 1995.
No, not at all. That'd be a terrible decision. What'd you think about this main event, though, Kyle?
I mean, like I said, this match actually went longer than I actually thought. I actually thought they weren't going to give this as much time as they actually gave it.
C stands for committed, dude. That's why they're going long.
This is very, very true. Yeah, so Luger actually gets chased out of the ring by Macho right at the beginning of the match, and Luger's playing the classic heel, yelling at the ref, telling him, keep Savage on a leash here. I'm a professional wrestler. I'm not here to fight a bunch of animals. Obviously, Randy Anderson has no time for that shit and just rings the bell because that's Randy Anderson, and I think at this point, yeah. I think only one ref at a time can get the training done. So I think maybe Nick Patrick is turning a new leaf. Randy Anderson, you're next. So then Lex tries to shake his hand, which Savage is having none of. Classist move by Savage, obviously kicks Lex. But obviously, no one's going to say that to Macho Man because Macho Man is Macho Man. He's the face, so he could do whatever heel tactics he wants. That is just just smart moves by them, not a classless, disgusting act.
I've always found that weird the way they do that.
Hogan's the worst about it because Hogan's a super babyface, but he can do any kind of heel tactic he wants. He can rake the eyes,
and they just consider it smart move or good tactics, but it's diabolical if the heel does it.
Yep. Eric, by the way, throughout this whole, we kind of been talking about it. Eric is actually, this has been one of the worst shows as far as WWF getting a lot of digs by Eric. He was saying something along the lines of, hey, stay with Nitro because, they may go long if they have to, but, not like the Can Wrestling show that ends at 10 sharp. We're reminded once again what the C stands for. So Savage, I feel like there's two kinds of matches that Savage fights. He's either the guy that's 95% of the time getting his ass kicked and then kind of fights back and comes up with the win, or he's got that kind of control frenzy offense. And that's what we're actually seeing here. Savage, for the most part in this match, is in control. And Luger is almost acting like the face in peril throughout the whole match, even though he's not a face. Around this time we find out that next week is going to be Nitro's going to be in Charlotte, which now that main event is going to be nuts, totally nuts.
Yeah, strange booking decision there, I think, to put it in Flair country and have him working against your top babyface.
Well, not only that, but we've already been talking about how Hogan's kind of been teetering that. I think that people are starting to get sick and tired of the whole Hulkamania gimmick, and in Charlotte they're going to boo the shit out of Hogan. So this is just, this is not the best place for Hogan to, get some, I guess, positive TV time. This is not the good place, especially if he's going to fight Flair. Even if Hogan was just wrestling, he'd probably get booed. But the fact that he's now also going to fight Flair, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Very weird booking. Obviously, we'll find out next week how that goes. I don't see it going well. We get a quick break. We get the Mysteries of the Orient again. The Starrcade promo, which once again in the middle of live matches.
Hate it. We'll always hate it.
So we come back. Macho Man's still in control. He's working. He's like Kurosawa, just working the arm of Luger, which is kind of like a taste of his own medicine because Luger did that to Macho Man. That's the reason why Macho Man has his injury. Which at this point, I don't know if Macho Man's injury is more kayfabe than legit at this point. I was still under the impression that he was not going to be at World War III, let alone be the world champion. So I don't know what the hell's going on. It's either that or just Macho Man's your old school wrestler, man. If you're hurt, you wrestle anyways. If you don't wrestle, you don't get paid.
Right.
So I think that's kind of the mindset with Macho. They spill out to the outside where Macho Man continues beating on Luger for like a good solid 2 minutes. And not once did Randy Anderson think it was necessary to count these guys out. Which I also thought, once again, Randy Anderson, you gotta get your act together. Then there was a point where Mongo and Heenan were actually agreeing on things during the match. And I'm like, wow, like this is the first time I think they've had an exchange where Mongo didn't call him like, you got rocks for brains or whatever. And I'm like,
You're dumber than dirt.
Yeah, this is actually some decent chemistry. And then next thing you know, he calls Heenan fat boy. I'm like, well, there you go. Never mind. Mongo's back to his old self. At one point, Luger gets the upper hand. After Savage tries to hit him from the apron, hits the guardrail. Savage kind of gets raked in the eyes, almost clocks Randy Anderson, which I also found funny because Jimmy Hart was pleading the case with the ref like to get him disqualified. And I thought that was kind of stupid, Jimmy, because obviously if Lex wins the match by DQ, he doesn't win the title. So, Jimmy, keep your mouth shut. Bischoff back to digging against WWF again, talking about how both these guys are kind of wrestling injured, but they're keeping on fighting. And then he says, do you want to watch wrestling or do you want to watch people talk about wrestling? Which is, I thought, kind of ironic because that's kind of what beat WCW. Because WWF really couldn't beat them at the wrestling because they had all the big names. But they really did know how to ultimately be able to create a better, more entertaining product, when all was said and done. Then he made a dig at Shawn Michaels. At least I think he did. He was shitting on the fact that their wrestlers will fight while injured, unlike other certain superstars or certain stars on another program. Theirs are much more resilient.
Towards Michaels, especially given everything that we're going to talk about in Raw here in a second.
Yep. So at some point during the match, the top turnbuckle got exposed.
Yeah, I don't know when that happened. All of a sudden, they're just talking about it, and I'm like, when? Where did that happen?
Yeah, so it looked like that was something that Jimmy Hart did. Lex goes over to hit Macho Man with the top turnbuckle. Macho Man reverses it, hits Lex in the head, which obviously causes Lex Luger to fall backwards in a completely unnatural way and knocks Randy Anderson out in a non-natural way.
So awkward here.
It is
one of the worst ref bumps I've seen in a while.
But the thing is, it's one of those things where it's like almost like a full circle. It's so bad that then it's funny and comical and awesome. Macho, obviously, since there's no ref around, this is the perfect time to hit your finisher, clearly. So Macho Man hits the elbow drop.
If you're playing a video game, you save that shit at this point. The ref's knocked out. You don't waste your finisher here.
Yeah, you save that special. Jimmy Hart motions for someone to come down to the ring. Randy grabs Jimmy Hart, brings him in the ring. Then you get Flair, who, by the way, is on probation, which they never even mentioned at all when he's coming down the ring. Hits Macho Man with the same brass knuckles that I'm pretty sure Arn Anderson used to hit Flair with a month ago. So basically, Flair just outright interfered in a world title match, and the booth is saying nothing about it. But then all of a sudden, Hulk comes down to the ring to confront Flair, and basically just pointing his finger and saying, nah, naughty, naughty Flair. And the whole booth is getting worried. They're like, oh, no, Hogan, you're on probation. You can't do anything. I'm pretty sure he's allowed to beat the shit out of Flair.
Right.
As long as he doesn't get himself involved in the actual match. So now Flair and Hogan are in the ring, because why the hell not? But then, for whatever reason, Hogan just runs over and just like kind of stops the count with Luger, because Luger was kind of draped over Savage after the brass knuckles hit. So Hogan does interfere in the match to stop Lex from getting the title.
Right.
We get the DQ. Next thing you know, everybody's kind of just going at each other. And then before Hulk seems like he can finally get his revenge on Lex Luger that he's been wanting for weeks, Sting comes in to try and stop him. Hogan hits Sting. And then Savage has to stop them from fighting, and then we go to break. So and that's kind of the match. So from an actual match perspective, I actually really liked this match. No one really had the upper hand for very long, although for the most part, Savage was more on the offense than Lex. Lex was almost playing the face in peril, like I said before, even though he was a heel. But from a storytelling perspective, this was top-notch stuff. It got all the top players involved. It is going to bleed over into next week's, and Sting and Hogan are going to fight Flair and Arn. And it has a lot of those guys that are going to be involved in the triangle match, and ultimately the world title match. There's going to be a lot of drama and a lot of unanswered questions. So actually, as far as the match itself was okay, but I think the chemistry and the storytelling was really good. I actually gave it a pretty decent rating. I gave it 2 3/4 stars.
Yeah, you're a lot friendlier on this one than I was. I just gave it 2 stars. I thought it was a little bit slow match at times, which I guess you should expect when you have Lex in a match. But I think it was mostly because I knew this DQ finish was happening with the Giant, Flair, and Hogan and all that stuff, and the probations and things like that. And it does move along the story and kind of add some intrigue to next week's tag team match. But for me, just as a match as a whole, I was just kind of like, meh. I wasn't crazy into it. So gave it 2 stars, Kyle. And then to your point, as we went to commercial, Sting, Hogan, Macho Man, there's a lot of drama going on. A lot of fists were being thrown. And we come back from commercial, and they're all high-fiving and hugging. So whatever happened during the commercial break, apparently they sorted out their issues. They're all on Team Hogan. Mean Gene starts talking to him. Basically, Sting says that Luger's his best friend, and he'll keep Luger out of Macho and Hogan's faces. And the funniest part of this entire promo was when Hogan basically hates the word digress. He says something that he goes, "Let me digress for a minute, as some idiots might say." And I'm like, well, that's rude.
That's just kind of brutal, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a nice word to use. So overall, Kyle, they kind of go back to the commentary team to close out the show. They're discussing the triangle match, this dissension among Hulkamania, what's going to happen next week with the tag team match against Rick and Arn Anderson. Is Hogan and Sting, are they going to work out okay? Where's Macho Man fit into it? What about Lex Luger and his ties? So it's kind of a little chaos there, and that's the story. And, that's our show, Kyle. So what did you think about Nitro?
I think overall it kind of was a dud until the main event, which was not so much from like a technical wrestling standpoint being a great match, but I felt that, like I said before, I think it woke up the crowd a bit towards the end once everybody started coming down and kind of the chaos ensuing towards the end. It was good chaos. It wasn't like just people just coming down and clearing house with tables and chairs and shit. Like, this was actually kind of choreographed chaos, which is kind of a weird thing to put together. But I thought it was a nice breath of fresh air, because as the main events have been shit for a while on Nitro. So this one kind of saved the show, in my opinion. It really pushed the trust narrative between the guys of Hulkamania, this whole like Lex triangle of, Lex being in this purgatory of being a heel, but his best friend is one of the mega faces. I still think it's absolutely insane and stupid that they never booked a Mega Powers versus Sting and Lex match ever. Like, I feel like that would have been
I think it was writing itself at times too, just in the way they were doing the stories.
And you know how Sting is. Sting believes in beating the shit out of people to settle differences. So
absolutely.
So we also see that Hogan slowly but surely getting more and more boos. It's getting astronomically. It will get astronomically worse in Charlotte, I have a feeling, since he's going to be taking on Flair. Then you got the whole Luger actually being in the Dungeon of I almost said Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon of Doom, or if he's just like a gun for hire and he's just kind of like a floater. It just feels like after Halloween Havoc, he has had little to no affiliation with the group.
If Luger was in Dungeons and Dragons, he would probably have to be like a warrior. I could see him just like wearing his normal attire, like just at trunks, sort of like a Hercules sort of thing, and he just got like a two-handed sword that he walks around with.
Or a metal plate in his forearm.
Well, that's his secret ability. For me though, Kyle, I thought the show was just okay. Hated the Giant Scott Norton booking. I think that was so dumb. They did have all the big players though in the main event, which is all you can ask for. It was a longer show. They were committed. The C stands for committed, so it was okay. I guess at the end of the day, could have been worse. It could have been a lot better. I think when I saw the card, I think if you just looked at the card, I would have thought would have been a better show than it turned out to be, but it was okay. That said, Kyle, then we move over to Raw, and of course you remember this is our main. They were promoting one of the matches this week is that Intercontinental title match, and that's the promo that we open up with, Kyle. Our boy Cycle Sid is going to get his match against Marty Jannetty as well, and this is they show a little promo where Sid basically still whispers and you can't understand a fucking word he says. And then they give Marty Jannetty a little moment to give his little segment, and basically he says, "I'm not the biggest or the best." So I'm not sure where Marty Jannetty was going with that, but I guess that's one way to talk shit. And then we're gonna get some more updates, Kyle. Shawn Michael's doctor basically has some bad news on his conditions. But then we get to open up, Kyle, with the curtain jerker of all. You got your number one contender for the WWF World Title Championship, the British Bulldog, coming up in that in-your-house matchup. And he is, of course, going to flex his muscles and show his strength against Bob Sparkplug Holly, because that's a smart booking decision right there. Mr. Jobbing left and right Bob Holly going up against the guy who's trying to get this push. And then what better way, Kyle, to handle this match than to have Bob Holly look strong and beat the shit out of Bulldog for the majority of the match. Of course, don't forget, though, they do mention a couple of times that British Bulldog has Bret's number. Remember Wembley Stadium, 1992? 82,000 people. He beat Bret Hart there. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
I mean, I'm glad that they keep on reminding me because it felt like just a completely unimportant match.
Pretty much it was. Though Jerry Lawler brings up a comment about how, much like Bob Holly, the Redskins usually stink, but they beat the Cowboys. So apparently this Cowboys-Redskins match was worth mentioning on both shows. And I mean, ultimately, Kyle, Bob Holly is going to finally go to the ropes and get caught into a power slam for a 3 count for Bulldog. I give this 1 3/4 star match. I'm probably even being friendly there because I hated the booking decision. This is a Giant Scott Norton sort of situation, not to that degree, but it was British Bulldog, your number one contender. He should be looking great, and if he's going to wrestle Bob Holly, which I don't think he should be wrestling, he should be wrestling somebody a little more firepower. He shouldn't be, getting dominated by Bob Holly for the majority of the match. So, yeah, he won in the end, but I thought it was strange. What about you?
Yep, I kind of echo the same thing. I thought the match was fine. I thought the booking was terrible. The whole point is to make Bulldog look like a main eventer, or at least a main event threat. And at this point, it was basically booked like a mid-carder. So it's no wonder that, when you look at the history of British Bulldog being in like the big spots in pay-per-views, those pay-per-views like don't sell very well.
Like Wembley Stadium, 1992.
82,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only time where it doesn't bomb is because it's actually in his hometown. I actually was more interested in the back and forth between Vince and Lawler. And even like I said, the match was fine, but the focus should be on the number one contender, and it really wasn't. It made Sparkplug look relevant in a time where his career is completely irrelevant. So I give it 1.5 stars.
Yeah, after the match, Kyle, we get a recap. Bob Backlund, of course, during the Bret Hart Brother Love segment last week, he did that crossface chicken wing to Bret Hart. They show that Backlund on WWF Superstars over the weekend also gave a crossface chicken wing to Jim Ross. So Bob Backlund on the offensive lately. So he's out campaigning as well because that's a good way to campaign. And they got King who interviews Bob Backlund. Basically, they lets him know that Bob is going to have a match against Bret Hart next week on Raw. And then he tells him that it's going to be a non-title match, which, of course, Bob Backlund loses his damn mind over.
Well, because he wanted to be God again.
Right, yeah. At this point, they tell him to kill the mic. They're yelling, kill the mic. There's a sign somebody showed, like a producer sign that says, go to break. It's kind of just a weird promo altogether. They do eventually mute his mic, go to commercial. And we come back and we're blessed with the match of Fatu versus the Brooklyn Brawler. But first, Kyle, during the commercial break, Bob Backlund on the prowl looking for the sound engineer that muted him. Fatu hits the splash to win the match. There's really nothing to talk about here, except at one point, Lawler makes a comment that the New York Jets, I forget the guy's name, Washington, something in Washington, gave a hit to Chris Miller that gave him a concussion, and now he's history, which I just think it's funny how lighthearted he's making concussion sound in 1995. Match was a 1-star. Ultimately, they were just the fact that Bob Backlund hunting down the sound engineer is the highlight of this. Tells you all you need to know about Fatu versus Brooklyn Brawler.
Yeah, I gave it 1.5. I thought the match was fine. I think Fatu being in a squash match is kind of weird, just because I feel like I don't know what they're doing with Fatu. Usually squash matches are meant for enhancement. I don't think they're really using Fatu as an enhancement, so it's just once again, another weirdly booked match. And yeah, like I said, the kind of the video of them showing Backlund looking for the sound guy was more interesting, and it was basically the same length as the actual match itself. Once again, 1.5 stars.
After this, Kyle, we get an In Your House promo segment brought to you by Doc Hendricks. And he's brought to you by cocaine. Yeah, well, they go hand in hand. Owen Hart, as you remember last week, he put out an open contract, Kyle, for someone to wrestle him at In Your House. So that was answered. But before we're able to find out who answered the call, Bob Backlund does get his revenge on the sound guy and beats the shit out of some nerdy dude who's standing behind a sound system.
Like a scrawny Vanilla Ice.
Yeah. And then they come back, Kyle. Who's going to wrestle Owen Hart? I know you and I were both on pins and needles waiting to find out the answer. Diesel. Diesel's going to wrestle Owen Hart.
Not what I expected.
No, not at all. I love Owen Hart. I love Diesel. I think this match is going to be absolute horse shit. Could not be less excited for that to be the guy who responded to the contract. But we'll see. Then, Kyle, we got, as we fade to commercial, they got scenes of the upcoming match between Jannetty and Sid, as well as we get a little more updates from HBK's doctor, and it doesn't sound good still. And when we come back, Kyle, we've got our Dean Douglas versus Razor Ramon Intercontinental title match, which I assumed was going to be the main event, and yet here it is.
So a little bit of a kind of a food for thought, or like a fun fact, is that this was actually the last match in the tapings in Richmond, Virginia, but they reworked it, they repurposed it for TV to be in the middle of this card. But it was actually a dark match at the end of the taping. So one thing, when I heard about that, I actually started paying attention to who was sitting in the crowd. There's different people in the crowd during this match.
Really?
Which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, because when I heard about that, I'm like, I decided to kind of pay attention. So yeah, this was actually, I guess, technically the main event of the whole card, and which is also a reason why, if you notice at the end of the match, Razor Ramon is in the ring for an extended period of time after the match is over. He's kind of like posing with the belt and things like that. It's because I think that was literally the end of the taping, so he got to be out there to kind of pander for a bit.
Well, what did you think about this match between the two of them?
It wasn't my favorite match. I'll say that right now. So, like I said, for the most part, Razor is working the arm on Dean. And one thing I thought was kind of funny, this might be the artwork for this episode, is that on Razor Ramon's boot is like a thing of masking tape with like red Sharpie that just says Shawn.
So poor.
I loved it though. It was just like it's a kayfabe injury, and he's making it seem like he just died he's supporting his friend who just died of cancer.
Like he's just fighting some illness or something like that. But then it was like so poorly done too. It was just like it looked like so half-assed.
Well, it looked like he hired his 4-year-old son to write it on there. It just looked like he just wrote it in the back and stuck it on there and didn't even tell Vince. He just did it. But fortunately, the camera saw it and gave us a good close up on it. So you might see that as the artwork for this one. Dean does like a shitty looking bulldog from the second rope. Puts Dean on the offense.
So bad. Dean looked bad doing it. Razor looked awful selling it. It was terrible.
I also think that there's still some in the back politics. I think Razor didn't feel like making Dean look good. Anyways. So I think once again, this is kind of like Dean slowly on his way out of the WWF. They keep on talking about Dean having a back injury or nagging back injury, which I think actually is a legitimate thing, and I think that is what kind of ends Dean's time there, and then he just never gets a second chance. Dean all of a sudden like a spider monkey jumps to that middle rope and he like twists around. And looks like what's going to do like a sweet move. But of course, WWF and their stupid, horribly timed commercial breaks, they go to break while he's in midair, like a la Owen Hart.
I don't get it. You're a pre-produced show.
I can't stand it because they're like, we gotta go to break, but they're up, and then they kind of just disappear. Like, that's not a hook. Like, you're a taped show. You can easily take the break 5 seconds before that, or at least let him do the move, have him kick out, and then go to break. Like something where, like, oh my god, what's going to go happen next? Instead, we get the double feature. We find out what he did. It was just like a little splash on his back. Not a big deal, but still, it would have been nice to actually get that quote unquote live on TV. Then Dean puts Razor in the abdominal stretch. He tries to do the whole pulling on the ropes to get that extra torque. But if you know anything from watching what we've watched so far, don't pull that shit on Earl. He's the only half.
Does he look like Randy Anderson to you? That shit ain't gonna fly.
I would say he's already showed that he's got the kick power to break those holds. So he does break the hold by counting. He kind of just tells him to let go of the hold. Vince all of a sudden starts talking about Bosnia. And I'll be honest, there's times where I really don't pay attention because I'm watching the match, and then Vince will just randomly just take a stance on something and how we have no business in Bosnia. Once again, that must have been a big thing in '95. And then Ramon tries. I think it was Dean was going to the top rope for like a crossbody, and Razor kind of like rolls him up and tries to pin him, and that's how he beat him at In Your House for the title. This time he kicks out of it. And then he just gets Razor's edge, and it was over. I thought that was just really weird. Like it didn't make anybody really look that great. Overall, I gave it a 1.75 stars. It was pretty sloppy. And I understand they're not the most nimble, most agile people in the world. The ending looked more like a squash match than a legit title defense. I just think that we're slowly but surely going to see the end of Dean Douglas. He did not look that impressive in the match. And usually if somebody just does a move and goes right into like a finisher, that to me is a squash ending. You're not like reversing something and outwitting somebody and getting your finisher or getting a small package and getting the surprise pin. This was Razor Ramon for the most part, just taking care of business and having a strong title defense and basically squashing Dean Douglas in the process.
Yeah, I mean, I gave it a 1.75 stars as well. I thought these two, both talented wrestlers, talented artists. I thought they have no chemistry between the two of them. I thought it was bad selling. Just they both looked bad. The commercial breaks were poorly timed. And then to your point, Kyle, about the Bosnia thing, King actually started it when he said this match was like Army versus Navy over the weekend, which, by the way, Army came back and won 14-13 over Navy with a drive, a 99-yard drive in the final 4 minutes of the game to win. So there's the sport thing. But then King said, loser of Army and Navy had to go to Bosnia. And Vince lost his damn mind about that. He's like, this is no laughing matter, just like this match. And there's your Bosnia comment there. But yeah,
thank you. I must have missed that. I appreciate it.
Yep. So there you have it. After this, Kyle, we get a promo for next week's match of Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund, and also Shawn Michaels will finally speak out for the first time since his collapse. And then we get our Brother Love segment, which is starting to be a reoccurring thing now. He's got King Mabel. Of course, King Mabel coming out with the power of the Undertaker around his neck. But where's Sir Mo, Kyle? Who knows at this point? Mabel goes on to say he's the first to pin Undertaker, which I think you called bullshit too.
Yep.
And now he said he'll be the first one to stuff him into a casket. So Mabel and Undertaker at In Your House is going to be a casket.
Which is also not true. Yokozuna stuffed him in a casket like 2 years before.
Well, this will be the first time that a 568 pound of pure hate will have done it.
I'm pretty sure that's Yokozuna.
Well, Brother Love says he has a surprise for King Mabel. Of course, King Mabel says he doesn't like surprises, and they go back and forth for a minute. Well, then Undertaker's music plays, and out comes a druid pushing a casket. They get to the ring. The druid turns out to be Sir Mo. So
What a shot! I love the face. That almost wanted me to do that as the artwork.
As
It's
the
like
artwork to his face.
It's me, Austin. That's all I thought about every time I looked at Sir Mo, looking at the crowd like, oh, did you think
Mabel.
it was me?
It was Sir Mo all along.
Ah, son of a bitch.
And he pulls out the casket. Turns out they graffitied the casket. So it's an Undertaker casket that's been King Mabel graffitied, which looked like really poor graffiti work with some spray paint. King Mabel loves it that it's Sir Mo, and then it's a graffitied casket, and that is our segment, Kyle. And the only thing that could make this even better is right before we go to commercial, we get Razor Ramon pumping up Marty Jannetty for his match. And I don't know what it is, but something about Razor Ramon and Marty Jannetty in the same room looking like buddies just seems strange to me.
I loved it because it was so cheesy. It was almost like two dudes with attitudes, but like just cornier.
Right, yeah, like they're trying to be two dudes with attitudes, but they're like your dad's being two dudes with
right.
attitudes.
It was like if there was like a cover band of two dudes with attitudes. That's Razor and Marty Jannetty.
Razor and Marty, yep. Of course, then we get our World Tour de Force promo, Kyle, and then we get the Raw Bowl, which is coming January 1st, so that'll be interesting to see what that's all about. And then we get our Psycho Sid versus Marty Jannetty. This is our main event match, Kyle. But first, we get Barry Dudinsky selling 7-foot-tall cardboard cutouts of Diesel and Undertaker for only $25, so the mayor of merchandising strikes again.
Sadly, I was more interested in what he was selling than what this match had to offer.
Well, also, not only does Barry Dudinsky strike again, but so does Marty. He strikes again early in this match, before the match even starts. At one point, Kyle, I just had the match was really not worth talking about, but there was a moment where Marty kicks Sid. Sid turns around, giving Marty time to climb up to the top to do like a flip off the top and kind of bulldog him. He stands there, and it's like an awkwardly long time of standing there to take the move. It just looks so poorly choreographed. Needless to say, eventually, of course, Ted DiBiase gets involved, then 1-2-3 Kid comes out, then Razor Ramon comes out. Eventually, the ref throws out the match. 1.5 stars for me, Kyle. There's really nothing worth mentioning. All they're doing is pushing the storyline of this Jannetty, Razor Ramon, Psycho Sid, 1-2-3 Kid tag match it in your house. That's about it. What did you think?
This match I felt was ridiculous. It was the main event. I gave it 1 star. I hated it. Bad execution in some parts of the match, which obviously we didn't even feel like it was worth even talking about the match. There really were no signature moves. We find out later that there was actually a winner. Marty Jannetty won because of the interference from Kid.
Apparently. And yeah, it was weird.
We find that out once again. It was just kind of like on the side. Oh, by the way, this is who cares who won? It was so there was no consequence.
Brings that up. I've noticed that sometimes where Vince is like, in the record books, you can put it down that it's so and so won this match, and that's what.
Well,
he says.
If the face wins, he'll do it. He'll mention it.
Right. Yeah.
But really, like the only thing that kind of happened was honestly nothing happened. Razor chases Kid off. It's just like it's overall it was horribly booked. Nothing happened with it. Razor, you had one fucking job. You were supposed to watch 1-2-3 Kid from coming to all you do is wait in the back and just make sure that 1-2-3 Kid doesn't come out. You fucked up.
Out there.
Yep. So, and well, then again, maybe he helped in a sense where Marty got the win by DQ.
Well, there you go. Marty might have gotten the win by DQ, Kyle, but he does take a power bomb from Sid for his troubles. And then before we go to commercial, we get a third promo now for what Shawn Michaels' doctors have said. So I feel like without seeing the promo, Kyle, I already know what the promo is all going to entail.
It's the super bad. It's a super bad of teases where we already know all the good stuff before we can see the movie.
All the best quotes. Of course, reminder, Kyle, Bret Hart versus Bob Backlund. This is like the third time they're pushing. This is our main event, likely for next week. But then we come back and we get the final segment of Raw. Todd Pettengill does a fluff piece, it feels like, on Shawn Michaels' status with some like uplifting, somber-ish kind of in-between music. Reports on Shawn Michaels' status, and he's talking to Dr. Unger, who of course is Shawn Michaels' doctor. And apparently Dr. Unger watches Raw with his wife, so that's always nice to see that him and his wife can enjoy the Raw product. and basically just starts discussing these concussion-like symptoms that Shawn Michaels has. But he also says Shawn's results are abnormal compared to most people with a similar situation. And then Todd Pettengill goes on to talk about all of Shawn's resiliency in the past, about how he came back, to win this title and do this and that. And Dr. Unger says, well, that's great, but the brain is not resilient. So basically shitting left and right on any chance that Shawn
I actually had a good laugh about that because Pettengill just is listing all of Shawn's resilience, like all these times where he's overcome all these beatings, and then says he has all the confidence in the world that his resiliency should help him be able to recover from this faster than a normal person would. And then you cue Dr. Unger immediately saying that's not how that works.
Right. He basically says and then Dr. Unger basically says he doesn't give a fuck about the WWF or Shawn Michaels ever wrestling there again. He thinks that Shawn is not progressing well and may never wrestle again. So really a negative promo. And we followed it up with Vince being heartwarming, talking about how we put these superstars of the WWF on a pedestal, that they are stronger, faster, they don't feel pain, they are the best in the world and all this. But it turns out they do feel pain, they're humans. And Shawn can't wait to get back to the ring, Kyle, but we don't know when that might be or if that'll ever be. And then the show ends. So that is your closing to Raw as a whole. Kyle, what did you think of this fantastic show?
If fantastic you meant fucking downright terrible, that is what this Raw was. You don't end on this. First of all, that's just weird. I think this also had another one of those hilarious intros where we were talking about something somber and Shawn may never wrestle again. And then cue the intro where he's dancing on a building.
Dancing, yep.
But no, it was bad. Bad booking, shit matches, not enough pop. I think I said here, not enough pop culture references to save it. And it's just unentertaining material to close out the show. So even if you had a chance at the end of the show, you had 10 minutes left to try and at least give some sort of substance to the show. Maybe at least go back to the booth, maybe interview a wrestler there, do something that like a cool little cheesy 90s interview. But none of that. It just ended on a somber mood. It just overall was just not entertaining at all to watch.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said. It was pretty much trash. It's probably one of the worst Raws we've seen since we started watching. Every match, I think, was pretty much terrible. They didn't have a ton of star power. They had a little bit, but it was just not good. And then the whole segment for the Shawn Michaels thing to close out the show was just bad. So bad show overall, Kyle. And I think it's not going to be much of a surprise here as we could talk about who won the battle. It's got to be Nitro this week, right?
Yeah, hands down. And honestly, that's not saying much. And we're not saying that Nitro was the greatest show this week either. It was okay, but it really wasn't
Tony
going up against any kind of.
Said it would have been the greatest show in the history of our sport, but he wasn't today.
This is true. I can't wait. Sadly, I can't wait to see him. But the thing here is that when the story is not being told well for the WWF, Nitro will just win on match quality for the most part. And it's mainly because WWF has the charisma and for the most part better writing. But when that is not the forefront and not complemented by story-driven matches, then at least have some form of relevancy. Then Raw is going to struggle, and Nitro will just win out because they can just bring out the big guns and carry the load. You can have a bad overall matches with WCW, but if you're bringing out Flair and Hogan and Sting and Lex and everybody out there like that, and just give something for the people to pop for, that itself can carry a bad Nitro. WWF right now, especially with Shawn now being on the shelf for a bit, you don't have a lot of people that have that kind of charisma and that power to really bring the crowd up a bit more. So it's gonna be rough for a while. Raw needs to keep things interested in the progression week to week. They're doing a bad job with that in recent weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it was easy that Nitro was a better show, but Nitro was just okay. It wasn't like it was a great show. It was just that's how bad Raw was. And to your point, Raw can't compete with the matches Nitro has. I feel like week in and week out, Kyle, we're always discussing Raw has probably 3, maybe 4 matches on a busy week, and at least half, 2/3 of them are squash matches. At least on Nitro's end, when you get Sting versus Kurosawa or something, Sting's going to win, but it doesn't feel as much of a squash match as, when you get Scott Taylor or something versus Gold Dust. You know?
And at least you have somebody in that match that's going to pander to the crowd, get the crowd going. Sting's going to have squash matches, but at the very least, Sting is keeping everybody excited during the match, regardless.
Yeah. So we'll have to see what going forward. That said, Kyle, Nielsen ratings came out. Nitro was down. Was a 2.4, which is down from a 2.5 last week, so just a small drop. Meanwhile, Raw went from a 2.3 the previous week up to a 2.6. So Raw jumped in the ratings, actually had the better finish, and I gotta say I'm surprised because I feel like Nitro had a good card that they were advertising. They had a world title match in their main event. Meanwhile, Raw wasn't really showing a whole lot. Their Intercontinental title match was in the middle of the card. Their main event was Marty Jannetty and Psycho Sid, followed by a Shawn Michaels doctor promo.
Just, like a fluff piece on Shawn Michaels.
Very strange that's what it is, but we'll have to see how they follow it up next week. And that's it. That's going to be our show this week, Kyle. For those of you who have not yet subscribed to us on iTunes or Google Play, we're there. What are you waiting for? Go.
You got rocks for brains?
You're dumber than dirt if you haven't been following us there. Leave us that rating. Of course, if you're not following us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, go follow us there. We're starting to heat up on the Twitter and Instagram. We're starting to get some followers. So give us a little bit of love there. Of course, MondayNightTours.com for all of our episodes, all of their social media accounts, all that kind of stuff. And tune in next week. Go on the WWE Network. Watch that December 11th, 1995 editions of Raw and Nitro. Let's see where we're at. Where that New Japan versus WCW roster is live. We're gonna probably find out what the matches are there. And we got that big Flair Anderson tag team match. We'll have to see how that finishes out. That said, for Kyle Hogan, I am Josh Kaiser, and we will see you next time on the Monday Night Tours.
I love that I can hear in the background the music. I'm rocking out to it. Have a wonderful Tuesday. See ya.